Hi, everyone. Welcome to this third session of our series, the mentorship series, that is co-organized by Sultan Doughan together with Sertaç Sehlikoglu and Roberta Raffaetà. So, like I said, this is the third episode in our series. My name is Ana Ivasiuc. I am currently serving the European Association of Social Anthropologists as vice president, and I served as president between 2023 and 2025. I am a teaching fellow at University College Dublin in Ireland and a social anthropologist working on issues of far right, policing, racial policing, migration, and vigilantism in Europe. And before I actually introduce the other speakers for today's session, I would like to give the floor to Sertaç so she can a little bit contextualize this third episode in the series and she can tell us a little bit more about what we've done in the two preceding episodes, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I will not take too much space. I just want to first welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for, as Anna said, the third and the final session of our Women Leadership Development series. And before I hand over to our brilliant speakers today, I want to take 5 minutes of your time to reflect on where we've been and why this final session is quite exciting for us. In our first session, we talked about the leadership ecosystem. We did talk about the gap between what standard leadership programs offer and what women, especially women of color, actually need when navigating academic leadership under precarity. We talked about the skills that nobody names and the structural conditions that nobody prepares you for. In our second session, we went deeper into the social dynamics. I sadly have missed that session, but I did watch it later on. We talked about the question of who's a friend and who's a foe, and how precarity shapes our relationships with each other, and how solidarity is something we have to actively choose rather than something that emerges automatically from shared struggle, because it doesn't. And today we are asking what might be perhaps even the hardest question of all. Once you understand the system, once you've built your skills, once you've found your allies, how do you actually assert power? How do you do it in ways that are authentic to who you are, to your principles, that don't require you to become someone that you've never approved of, if I can put it bluntly, and how to think about creating a space for others rather than closing it, which we believe require active investment. I'm not going to take more of your time. I just want to thank the EASA executive team for opening a platform for such important conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sertaç, and thank you for your commitment and involvement in this series. Without you, it wouldn't have had the same shape or wouldn't have existed at all, maybe.
Hopefully.
And thank you also to Roberta Raffaetà, who's not with us here today. So let me just introduce to you our speakers today. I will be chairing the session and I'll put myself in third place as a speaker as well. I've already introduced myself. Let me start in alphabetic order with Cristina Grasseni. So Cristina is a professor of cultural anthropology at the Institute of Cultural Anthropology and Development Sociology of Leiden University, which happens to be my alma mater. She specializes in economic and multimodal anthropology, and she researches issues of sustainability, citizenship, food heritage, responsible innovation. She is the PI of the ERC Consolidated Grant Food Citizens that happened between 2017 and 2024, where she led a team of 8 researchers who compared collective food procurement across Europe. She's also the co-editor of the Encyclopedia of Economic Anthropology, published in 2025, and is very known for her skilled visions approach to visual ethnography and other themes. I've quoted you on skilled visions, I think, for the first time about 10 or 12 years ago. And in 2011, she was appointed David and Roberta Logi Fellow at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University. So, Cristina, thank you for having accepted our invitation to speak with us today. And we are moving on to Dr. Giulia Zanini. So Giulia is Associate Professor of Anthropology at the Department of Philosophy and Cultural Heritage at Foscari University of Venice. And since completing her PhD at the European University Institute, she has held positions across Europe in many, many places at the University of the Aegean, the University of Barcelona, Queen Mary University of London, and the University of Padua. She works in the field of reproduction, health, and gender, and is currently the principal investigator of the ERC starting grant-funded project, PrecDat. I don't know if that's how you chose to pronounce it. But the project her role is to lead an interdisciplinary team on the socio-technical construction of reproductive and pregnancy time. So thank you, Giulia, as well, for having accepted to speak with us today on matters of women's leadership. And if you agree, I'm going to give the word to Cristina to start the conversation with us today.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for the lavish introduction and for the invitation. Great to continue the series. I watched the first 2 episodes. So the idea perhaps is today to add something or to continue reflect on something that has already been introduced in the previous, let's call them episodes of this series. Yeah, so on the previous episode, Ella Draskiewicz said, I feel very awkward, and I just want to say that I share this. Yeah, because this as we discussed, but for the record, this is an online space. It is also a mentorship space. It is a very intimate space at this very moment with so few participants online live, but we have also decided to record this and put it online for the benefit of others who might want to come back and watch this episode, just like I did with the previous 2. So that kind of limits the possibilities of frankness or going into details. Also because we have to take care of other people when we speak and we don't know whom we speak to. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I also consider it as a challenge because it's a very clear mandate to look back and think about what could be shared that might be useful to others. So that's how I interpret the invitation. So I understand that the idea is that I talk about 10 minutes or so, and then perhaps we go into discussion. So I was reflecting about the fact that as of late, I began to define myself as a first-generation academic because luckily the word has been found to define someone who is the first to receive higher education within their extended family. And again, because now I'm 54, that is not even very precise because For younger generations, it's more common now to go to university, also in Italy. And so I can proudly say that the younger generations of my extended family, or some of them, have received a university education. But it was very, very different when I registered for university in 1989. So that to begin, a reflection on the importance of inclusive institutions. So, for example, when I decided to go to university, it didn't depend, it wasn't a decision. It was the result of advice from other people who came from different walks of life and who could intuit that that could be a good idea for me, and would tell me, and would be in such a relationship that I would be inclined to understand, or rather accept without understanding, that paramount piece of advice. So I want to start far back in my past, because I did start reflecting when I was listening to the previous 2 episodes, that it was important to have a maths teacher in mandatory school who told me, no, you shouldn't become an accountant. You shouldn't go to accountancy school. And she took the pain of telling my parents too. You should go to, gymnasium or liceo, as we say in Italy, and get a preparation for university. And that was a very important first step. And the second important first step was, you shouldn't study law. Yeah, you should study what you want. And, okay, I don't know what I want. Well, think about it. So it's, I just want to honor the memory, because by now these people are dead, all of them. I want to honor the memory of people who took the time to give a good advice. And also I want to honor the memory of those people, like my parents, who accepted that advice. It was more important that they accepted it than I accepted it at the time. And now, once you've reflected about the importance of individuals and good advice, probably my choice of mercy as the key word for this reflection comes through. And probably I would like to go back and reflect a little bit more on the many facets of this outdated word. You also need inclusive institutions once you've taken this good piece of advice. Because perhaps the money is there, but not the way of thinking that would make you think that it's actually worth investing some money in your own higher education. So for me personally, in Northern Italy, one such inclusive institution was Collegio Ghislieri, a university college in Pavia, who basically provided a protected environment for students with merit, but also provided, we would call it a sliding scale, kind of admission fee, so that people could basically just think about study and have a library of their own and have some kind of personal support from peers when not one-to-one supervision. So it was very important for me personally to be admitted to a space like that, because then it allows you to be in the right place at the right time when opportunity arises. And I always say that I ended up doing my MPhil, which means masters, in Cambridge at St. John's College by chance. a series of, you know, good pieces of advice and people who went out of their ways to actually write that reference letter, or, you know, revise the essay or revise that letter of application. So this is very basic, but it really makes you think about how hard it is to come from a different walk of life and get into academia in the first place. Then it just gets worse. In the sense that everything has to be learned and everything has to be done possibly right, possibly the first time. And again, it's a question of luck, certainly. It's a question of being overly prepared. The best piece of advice I've ever received: be overly prepared. But it's also a question of mercy. And it's a question of mercy of the people you meet. It's also a question of mercy that one can have with oneself. And one cannot be perfect. One cannot get it right every single time. That means 30 years later, thinking about mercy means when you're confronted, like we always are, with what we could call intersectional presuppositions, and I don't want to use the word prejudice. Before prejudice comes expectation, presuppositions, stereotypes. It's not that we don't have them. Each of us has them. So we are bound to be confronted with them, of various type. They're about class, they're about affluence, they're about color, they're about race, they're about culture, they're about religion, they're about faith, spirituality, personal styles, accent. You cannot escape them. Having mercy probably also means, accepting them and trying to come up with some way of working with them in a constructive way. It can be irony. It can be finding other ways of establishing a relationship on other grounds. It can be surprising people. Being overly prepared always helps. That is the other side of mercy. The third type of mercy, and I will close, is the one that you can have yourself with the institutions that can be so, maddening from so many points of view, and depending on walks of lives. My experience is that institutional procedures are at the same time extremely diverse and absolutely commonsensical, in the sense that everyone thinks that their way of doing things is the right one. And so it's difficult to discuss what could be different, because it's not just about changing routines, it's about changing accepted procedures or questioning accepted procedures. And probably, here again, a way of showing mercy is to try and help by adopting, adapting, translating good ideas from other places. You discussed mock interviews in one of the previous episodes. And you you don't always need to be in a position of leadership to be able to introduce this kind of good ideas at the right place at the right time. So that's a way of practicing mercy to those institutions that you would hope would be as inclusive as you need them to be. And that's it. I hope I spoke for 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Cristina. I've taken notes and I have so many questions and comments. Looking forward to the discussion. Giulia, would you like to continue?
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Sertaç and Roberta, who's not there. And thank you, Cristina, for having started this conversation. So before I come to the 3 points I want to make, and I also want to introduce a little bit my story just by saying that I am a recent ERC starting grantee, if you say so. And I also went from precarity to a so-called stable position or permanent position through the ERC, through becoming a PI. And so it has already been said in this in another episodes that it's hard to change mindset, and that you might be on the defense that precarity in academia, like in every other situation of life, it's a way of staying in the world. So it becomes a way you act, even when you know that it doesn't, somehow it shouldn't apply to you anymore. So I don't want to go back to that. It has already been discussed, but I think we have to take it into account when we think about what can we do with, like, how can we use our power, whatever power it is, to make this a better world and the academia a better world as well for people who do research, especially when they do research together, which is, I think, from where we come from, I feel I can speak collectively here, is always basically. So the first step is maybe to think, if you can, okay, I can relax on that side, and I can address the rest from a position of strength. And somehow you need some little space to start, like, to stop fighting for your own job and to sort of make space for using that for the welfare of all, which doesn't mean that someone didn't act collectively before, but it means that you may start to see ways in which some position you got, whatever, at the very bottom of whatever institutional hierarchy, can give you some space to speak your voice and speak the voice of those who are of your peers or those who work with you or you are responsible for. So some of you have already said it's important to find mentors. I think it was Sertaç before, and I want to contribute on some thoughts on how to foster allyship and challenge some ideas about how to do that. So the first thing I want to bring is the importance of opening up, especially when you find yourself in this position. I find that it's important sometimes to do the first step, to not only to realize that you're not alone, but also to discuss that sometimes what you thought was the problem actually reflect a different issue in relation to the institution or the funder or the system or the way you organize work, like something bigger than you. So, and it's not only about sharing with everyone. And I totally understand what has been said before. We are all in different positions, and we cannot assume our issues, especially in position of leadership, are the same as the ones we work with if they are in, for example, in a precarious contract. But at the same time, I have the feeling that it's important to make the first step and say something is difficult or something is not working or something I find some struggles to your mentors if you're lucky enough to find some that you trust, or your peers, but also sometimes to your team members. I also want to stress that we all know that some people who end up working in collective projects, or having precarious position are very well experienced, or many of them very well experienced researchers. So I have the feeling that one of the first things to do is to really try to be open about what kind of struggles might be collective struggles, because they are connected to the way in which we are structurally led to do research. So in this way, I mean, open up. Sometimes it's good to involve all the team in realizing that there are structural boundaries we find, or that a collective work is needed to open up spaces. At the same time, I think it has been said as well, but I think it's important to listen. So that at one point I say my struggle and then I listen, because maybe in other experiences I can find ideas, I can find strategies. I cannot know, yes, I was there. This idea that I was there is I think it's very powerful. I was there before you, so I know a little bit what you're going through. But at the same time, we all know this there is never the same place for everyone. So listen to what other struggles team members or other staff, including in the institution, bring to you, to understand where what are the actual struggles we can bring on together to sort of make it better for everyone. And on this point, I want to go into my second point, which is acknowledge and foster collectivity. And I think this is especially important. And we all know that, especially in anthropology, we always underline how, research is never one person only enterprise. It's a collective endeavor. And in a context like academia, where we constantly live this paradox, especially as a leader of research groups, for example, that research can only be done collectively, but careers are individuals. I think it's especially important to find alliances with people within the institutions to provide space for conversation, welfare, and change for all the people involved. And by that, I mean to identify people within the institution who can help and engage them in understanding why change matters. Why do you want this procedure to be changed? Like Cristina said, the institutional way of thinking very often is there is a reason why the procedure is in this way, but the procedure doesn't adapt to different group of peoples, diverse group of peoples, or it's not inclusive, or it doesn't allow for certain kind of research to be done. So I think to find the right people within the institution, to engage them personally and professionally on why change matter is a good tip. And another one, I think, is encourage people, including precarious researchers, to collectively face struggles in their different position and together with people in different situation of power. And with that, I mean to recognize that sometimes you can do only a certain part of the job, but you cannot change by yourself some things that are structural. And this is something that I have the feeling that might come with the with the good intention, and we all know how good intentions are so catastrophic in many situations. It might be tempted to, okay, now I will fight for this because I know it's not right for the people who bring me the struggle. But at the same time, I have the feeling it's very important for us to acknowledge that we can achieve change if we work together, and we don't think we are the only one who can change the world. I'll give you an example from my experience here without being too personal, but so everyone knows, so it's no secret that research or academia is more and more leaving individual researchers sort of paying for their own work until they will evaluate if they did well enough to be reimbursed for their work. And this translates, for example, in Italian University on the fact that researchers need to pay in advance for their fieldwork trips, and then they will be reimbursed at one point. Or they can ask for a little advance, but not the whole amount of money. And as you can imagine, this has a lot of it affects people in very different ways, but it's especially problematic for people who have precarious jobs or are in a less favorable economic situation. So, and of course, when you work with a group of people who travel to do field work, this is a constant conversation that we're having. And in the very beginning, I thought, okay, this cannot be true. And I spent a lot of energy and time to try to make the institution understand this. But I soon realized this was not a one-off, of course, one-person struggle. It's a systemic way of treating research and researchers. So that's what I mean. Like, we need to sort of everyone fight from their own position, but having a collective goal and identifying these collective goals, I think it's crucial for all of us. And the third point I want to make refers to something that I think has to do with this very series as well, which is making transmission and conversation part of the role. So what I want to say with that is the importance of acknowledging that our role can be one of transmitting ideas and strategies to make, like, when you have done a little step and you have the feeling that it works well for the life of many, then make it available and transparent for other people to maybe try that or have it at hand so that they can then maybe try to develop another little step. So trying to make little space for not only networking. It has been said before, like networking is at the bottom of our priority, but I think this is more than networking. It's really like trying, how can we try? So maybe it's a question as well, but I think that one of the way to make this better is to really build collective archives of practices, make it available so that others can take from there. And this series has already achieved that a little bit. I mean, that I have been, it happened to me that one of the people who was present put another participant in touch with me so that I could share with her our practices for compensated participants, for example, and they had a thought about how this could apply to their own research. So this kind of informal exchanges, let's say, should, I think, become more common ways of talking about research, and especially collective research in nowadays academic environments, even if we all know that, of course, there are so many different institutions, so many different projects, so many different issues and situations, but like trying to think of some kind of flexible structure that we build all together for each other and for others to find ideas and strategies and people to talk to more easily, I think it might really help in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Giulia. So much food for thought in what you just shared with us. Thank you. So I'll build a little bit on some of the things that both of you have said. And as the third speaker now, I'll be addressing a couple of the issues related to what I had to face as in my position of leadership within the European Association of Social Anthropologists. And so for that reason, I'm going to be very personal and speak about my own experience. But at the same time, of course, as an anthropologist, we all know that we bring the personal and the individual to the level of abstraction necessary to be able to think about groups and about social dynamics. And so the first thing that I really want to recognize is how important it is to think about, if you don't see it, you can't be it. Right. This is something that Cristina also hinted at when she mentioned, you know, her being a first generation scholar. For me, it had never occurred to me to even run for elections within the EASA if I hadn't seen already Maria Ivancheva having been elected president of the EASA in 2020, I think it was, or 2021. She was president from 2021 to 2023. She was precarious when she started her mandate, and she was a woman from Eastern Europe, just like me. She is one of the founders of the PrecAnthro collective. I'm not sure if you're aware of that collective. It's a collective that was set up sort of informally in 2016 in Milan at the EASA conference, where it turned out that quite a lot of our members were interested in the issue of precarity. And so Maria and Martin Fota and a couple of other people had called for an informal meeting about precarity in academia, and it turned out that the room was too small for all the people that were interested in the conversation to happen. And so with a lot of grace, Maria has really acted as a mentor for me in many ways. She's the one who opened up for me the possibility of running for elections. And although I never thought I could actually, I was hoping to get in the executive committee, but I never expected to be elected president. She was really the one who opened the road for me. And I hope for a lot of, other precarious, perhaps Eastern European women, or I should say racialized women. All of us here are white, or we are read very often as white, and predominantly we are read as white, I think. Although I think it's important to mention that we might be racialized in different contexts in different ways. I am racialized as an Eastern European as soon as I mentioned that I'm from Romania, which does not have a tradition in anthropology, right? I mean, we do have a couple of prominent anthropologists, but there is no famous school of anthropology, right? So my PhD officially is in sociology because there was no anthropology department where I did my PhD, although I did it with the most prominent Romanian anthropologist, Vintila Mihailescu. And so I come from that position of marginality as well, where, there is no tradition in anthropology where I came from. I had my PhD not officially in anthropology, and so that can be contested as well. I think, if you're from Italy, you can also be racialized as Southern European. And so I think that, in many contexts of Northern European academic institutions, we are definitely hierarchized differently, right? And so the other sort of point of marginality in my own trajectory was the fact that I was precarious, of course, but I was also not in an anthropology department until 2021, when I got a position as assistant professor at the University of Maynooth in Ireland. This is also the reason why I moved to Ireland, receiving assurances from the person that I was replacing in teaching that they would not come back to the department and that position would be potentially mine. And so I moved from Germany. So from a context in which I was already a migrant, I moved to another country with my family, having been reassured of a permanent position, which in the end turned out not to be permanent at all, because the person who had, talked to me about the fact that they wouldn't be coming back to the department ended up coming back to the department without even, having a conversation about that and sort of maybe thinking together about future possibilities. That did not happen. And so during my mandate as a president, I was unemployed for 9 months. And those were really, really difficult months. There were months where I felt used, abused, and discarded by the university. And the only thing that kept me going was really my position within the European Association of Social Anthropologists. I had to go on, and I realized, and you're all, probably familiar with the work that PrecAnthro has done in the past together with EASA, where they've Martin Fota and Maria Ivanceva together with Raluca Pernes have conducted research among the EASA membership, and about 2/3 of the people who responded to that survey are precarious. And so I came to understand that actually I am not representing a margin, but most of our members. Most of our members are precarious. And so it was really a difficult period of time and a difficult situation for me personally, as not being institutionally affiliated, but being in a very prestigious position of power, right? So at the same time, being completely disempowered with regard to my own trajectory of employment within the university and feeling used, abused, and discarded, and at the same time being in a position of visibility and prestige, and a position from where I could advocate for certain changes that I saw necessary within the EASA. And of course, at the same time, what was happening and what proved to be really defining for my mandate as president was the genocide in Gaza. So I started my office in March 2023, and then in October we all know what happened. And I happen to have a lot of knowledge about Palestine because when I was studying in Leiden, I did my BA. That was pre-Bologna, of course, at that time in 1998. 2003, 2004. I did research with Palestinians in Chile. And so because of that and because of the diasporic narratives, I had read a lot about the history in Palestine. And so I was aware of what was happening there, and I was aware of the wider context that we as anthropologists, of course, are aware of. And so that led me to formulate a statement, which I'm sure you're all aware of, deploring what was happening in Gaza and in no uncertain terms blaming Israel for it, right? expanding the conversation from accusations and condemnations of terrorism to the wider context of settler colonialism and the wider context of apartheid and violence that Palestinians had been subjected to for decades, right? And because of that knowledge and because of my previous research experience, I felt extremely empowered to act that way. And I have to say that I was lucky to have an executive committee who were all behind the statement, right? None of us, I mean, we did have discussions about, you know, how is it best to frame things, but we were all on the same side of the barricade, so to say. And I felt incredibly supported by the entire executive committee, and I am proud of what we did. You know, we were the first anthropological association to have published a statement. And of course, you know, I want to put all of this in context. Our statement, of course, didn't solve anything, right? But it did offer anthropologists a way to relate to a community that was doing the right thing. And I think that in the, you know, the fact that colleagues have proposed a motion for EASA to take a very visible and clear stance with regards to cooperations with Israeli academic institutions. And so I think that move was very well not only accepted, but very welcomed by the community of the EASA members, right? 80% of our members voted in favor of that motion. And so I know that in that mandate, which, you know, I've met with past presidents of the EASA, and they said, you have a much more difficult mandate than I ever had because of what's happening. And while I do acknowledge that, I also want to say that I feel extremely not only proud, but privileged to have been, you know, at the leadership of EASA at that particular time, because I think that one of the aims of EASA as an institution is to protect also our reputation as a discipline. And I think that part of that reputation as a discipline means us as an institution having been on the right side of history. And this was something that I've never put under a question mark. During the following weeks and months, of course, we received backlash. And so now I want to move on to the topic of what it means, you know, to be a woman leader from the margin in an institution that took a stance with regards to one of the most controversial topics and events at that time. I think in the meantime, things have become a lot clearer for a lot more people. But at that time, talking about October 2023, right? We published our statement on the 23rd of October, so very, very fast after the 7th of October took place. And I wanted to talk about the importance of courage, right? The fact that I was absolutely certain that we were on the right side, and for me that meant that we could not and we should not, you know, make any concessions or give up. You know, individual members of the executive committee have received and have been put under a lot of pressure by some of the older guard of the EASA founders and people who had important roles in the EASA executive committees successive over the years, right? And we've held our line, and I am absolutely proud of having done that, of not having diluted our language and not having succumbed to the pressures. Talking with some of my colleagues from the executive committee, you know, some of us were afraid for our careers. At that time, I was unemployed, so I was kind of not afraid, you know, I was already as low as possible. And this is probably also one of the ambivalent ways in which I felt empowered to act, because I had nothing to lose at that time. I had nothing, so I had nothing to lose, right? But at the same time, I was aware of the fact that my position on Palestine and on Gaza might close doors for me in the future, which is something that I absolutely assumed as as a position, as a political position. It was much more important for me to speak truth to power and to in the end to represent our community, right? Which, you know, for the most part did support the stance that we took. So what I think is really important in that time of pushback, what was important for me was to you know, to answer to all those letters of pressure that arrived and messages of pressure that arrived, you know, and some of them were really framed in very paternalistic ways, and there was definitely a dynamic there to be observed between older, very established male professors talking down to people like me, you know. And what was really helpful at that time was to fall back on institutional channels and to say, from now on, every conversation that you have with us, every message that you send us, will be made public. And that's the only moment when the pressures have stopped on all of us as executive committee, both collectively and individually. So I think that relying on institutional procedures and on a strong institution and saying, you know, I am going to make this public. I am going to show, you know, how you talk to us, which is absolutely unacceptable. I've written an article on that in a special issue of Public Anthropologist. I know it's behind a paywall, but feel free to message me for the PDF. And I detail all the pressures that the executive committee has been put under after we published our statement on Gaza. And the last thing that I wanted to say really is also speaking to something that both of you have touched upon, the importance of having institutions who are inclusive. So having been a precarious academic and having been on the verge to give up and to quit, you know, to drop out of academia because of financial reasons several times, the first thing that I wanted to do within EASA is to set up a precarity fund, right? An emergence precarity fund that would help bridge periods of unemployment for people who had a good CV but had not yet reached permanent employment, right? And so that was a battle, and it still is a battle. We finally agreed in the current executive committee to do it. But it has been a battle because people who come to represent institutions, there's something very weird that happens, that even if they are progressive, they do think about representing the institution and the institution's interest, which might actually not be that progressive. And so it was, you know, very eye-opening for me to notice how people who are progressive, you know, and who would be politically for a politics of redistribution in society at large, when it comes to an institution that they represent, they come to embody relatively conservative positions of, you know, is this a good use of money? Why don't we do something else? Well, we do have this mentorship program, for example, in which we are supposed to, you know, invest in people and grow people's skills and develop leadership in our institution, in our members, and so on. But I cannot overstate how important it is to also have the material support that people need at times. There have been times, there has been a month during my presidency as well when I didn't know how to pay my rent. And I was the president of EASA, right? And so I think that it was really important for me to see the world from that underprivileged perspective and to understand how important it is for, I mean, I knew that before, right? How important it is, and to be able to voice how important it is for people to be retained, you know, in academia and among us in periods of financial hardship. So this is the good news for today's webinar, is that this fund for precarious scholars is going to happen, but we have to frame it in different ways. to accommodate the fact that EASA is a charity, and EASA's object of charity is to promote anthropology and not to do charity. And so this fund will have to be phrased in sort of in terms of a fellowship of excellence, right? But the basis of it, and I hope that everybody will be able to understand that its actual purpose is to support those among our members who might be out of precarious contracts for a few months and not being able to feed their families or pay their rent, and might consider dropping out of academia when in fact they do have a future among us. So I think I'll stop there to leave some time for conversations. Sertaç, you had a question.
I have a series of reflections connecting the conversational. Thank you, everyone. I actually took a couple of smaller unrelated, related but not connected notes, but I want to, okay, I will start with this. As the co-organizer, I wanted to have EASA leadership in this series because of actually what you've just summarized, because of all these matter, because I mean, I know intimately, but I think at certain level, some of the elements that EASA leadership of the last several years has been showing very important elements for us to learn from. But I want to start with highlighting what I want to call, being magnificent, okay? And it will make sense to you in a minute. So we were witnessing, I mean, we did read your piece. I was there when the EASA leadership was under scrutiny for their support of Gaza. And I did watch that debate, and I did kind of watch all these condescending notes and how beautifully and gracefully you and Hayal have responded and handled, and the crowd's response, that entire room was magnificent. But I want to say something about being magnificent, okay? And it will connect to both what Giulia and Cristina said. Cristina, you said something about your time at Cambridge. You said, I was there by chance, but I spent 10 years at Cambridge. Everybody who felt like they were there by chance are those who feel like they don't fit. Okay, they are like, most of my friends were people of color, of course, but the more you talk to people who feel that way, who are like, white or white passing, then you realize there's an element of class. There are other elements of not fitting. But, like in those 10 years, one of the things I've realized that everybody, like 71% of the people feel like they don't fit. 70% of the students feel like they kind of just fell through the cracks and it's by chance, etc. But they are the ones who are a lot more talented, actually. Like sometimes 4 times more talented. It's just like the system is not designed for us, and the institution make us feel like as if they granted us access rather than we deserved it. But as somebody who has sit on committees, who has evaluated student submissions, who has given like supervisions, etc., I know that most of the time they are the ones who deserved a lot more. And starting from that day, when we are students, when we feel like we kind of fell through the cracks and we ended up in these big institutions by chance, to the point of us becoming a leader or a senior or mid-career scholar, we are the same people. We are the same, I'm sorry to say, not sorry, but sorry. That's the same talented person who's always thinking about elevating around us. Sometimes that elevation is, like Giulia said, by offering support to the people around us, even when we are ourselves juniors, right? Sometimes it is kind of thinking about, how to make it more perfect, how to make it more, accessible to people. So it's kind of that magnificence starts when we are junior, and it kind of continues later on. And then what happens later on is that when you finally reach that, when you feel like you finally reach that seniority, then you are a little bit punished for it. because for people who are coming from more disadvantaged backgrounds, the institution wants to pretend as if they have been granting us access. That's why we were feeling like we were lucky enough to get into, I don't know, Cambridge, Oxford, whatever that elite institution is. But also there is this almost like the institution itself has that white savior complex. But when we kind of express ourselves fully with our own magnificence, then they kind of turn this around to punish us. They don't say, for instance, that's another version of, you know, how all that infantilizing discourses around race theory, that's another version of that. That's kind of, you are allowed to say smaller things, but you are not allowed to be that senior person with a vision. You are not allowed to be that kind of person who's kind of doing transformative work. That's for other people. It's just, you know, there were these kind of continuing threads. I have a couple of other notes as well, but I'm very curious about the broader conversation. I can slip others in, but I just wanted to, it was burning, so I needed to say that, and while thanking you.
Thank you so much. If I can just jump on something that you said, you mentioned Hayal, and I really want to mention her and how important it was for her to be in the executive committee last mandate and to be a president this mandate. She is so amazing, and I have to really of course, I talked about myself because, you know, this is sort of like an auto-ethnographic account of what it meant to be in that leadership position. But I really want to mention how graceful she is. She's a lot more graceful than I can ever be. She's very diplomatic and at the same time, you know, extremely firm, but with a grace that I don't feel I have. But also, I want to mention that, you know, even though I am the one who signed that statement for Gaza, and I am the one who was president at that time, she is the one who is getting a lot more abuse and a lot more pressure at the moment. You know, this hasn't come up in public discussions, but we've received threats from UK lawyers for Israel, and you know, there's been an article in the UK media about us that actually portrayed Hayal. You know, they took her Facebook profile photo in which she's visibly a Muslim woman, right? And this is treatment that I did not have, right? Nobody put my photo there because I'm not a veiled woman, you know? And so I do want to acknowledge that and to observe, you know, to make that remark as to how much more difficult it is for a woman who is not necessarily racialized as white to begin with, to go under all these pressures, especially when it comes to Gaza. But thank you for mentioning Hayal. She was an amazing partner in that debate. There's a background story to it, but I don't want to say it in a recording. I'll say it to you afterwards when we stop.
Yes, please.
When we stop the
Guys, get out.
the recording. Right. So, Cristina and Giulia, do you want to bounce back on anything that the others have said, perhaps? If not, spontaneously, I would actually have a question for you, Cristina.
My reaction was just to go back to the question of providing perhaps a broader definition of diversity than the one that is usually then employed in reflections, institutional reflections about how to make academic institutions more diverse, therefore more resilient. And I find that unfortunately, then let's say on a banal, everyday operational level, that translates in terms of color of the skin. So I appreciate a reflection on, especially in the European Association of Social Anthropology, that a reflection on all the potential internal divides You mentioned the northern-southern European divide. You also mentioned being racialized as Eastern European. And obviously that speaks to real life experience of many of us. So I think it is important to remember that diversity is not only, obviously it is also, but it is not only a question of color. That it does have to do with the many sometimes nuanced ways in which background counts. Sertaç mentioned in one of the previous episodes, I think the very first one, something like the fact that being a boss is a very distinctive social capital, and you only learn it if you see your parents giving orders to others. And I think that's a very deep ethnographic observation that relates to what I understand is the topic of this entire series. How do you become a so-called leader in academia? And I say so-called because the word leader doesn't particularly, I don't find it very appealing. But yeah, how do you stop being infantilized? And one of the things that perhaps hasn't been discussed so much in these 3 episodes is the fact that you're not infantilized all the time, or rather that another facet is the fact that you're not young forever. You're not junior forever. At some point, you do stop being young and junior, and that's when you're all of a sudden old and decrepit. So somehow, maturity never happens. So that is something I suggest that perhaps you explore more if there will be following episodes or following meetings on this issue. How do you learn to deal with people who are never somehow ready to accept, I don't want to say authority, but like your preparation.
Yeah.
Going back to that simple word of being overly prepared. And it is not about dealing with men. It's not about dealing with men. It's just as equally dealing with women. Sometimes I even had the impression that a woman in a certain position of, let's say, authority finds it even more difficult to be listened to and to be a viable point of reference for other women than for, let's say, younger men. And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to go into easy conclusions. But yes, it is an issue.
Yeah, thank you very much, Giulia.
I thought there was Barbara before. Anyway.
Yeah. All right, so let's take Giulia first, because as a speaker, I would like her to intervene as well, and then we'll get to you, Barbara. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you. Just 1 minute only. I wanted to respond by stressing how I really appreciated how we sort of related to the question of power and women in certain position in relation to the institution. And this institution, I like what you brought to the table, and it was very different. EASA is a very different situation that a university, and a university in Italy might be very different from the UK because they are organized very differently. And what I think is rather interesting and we need to think about collectively is how having like an agenda we can stand behind as group in an institution can actually be very powerful, as you showed in the case of the statement as executive committee in EASA. As you said, the fact of being within the institution sort of protected you, if you want, also gave you some courage maybe individually to put yourself out there. So, and I think this is a very important contribution to, like, the institution is not the evil here. It's the way how it has been, different kind of institutions have been made into spaces where only certain kind of people fit in, that is evil, sort of, or that makes it evil for so many other people. So I think we need to really think about that and work on that, because there is a potential for, I don't want to say change the institution, whatever, like to build group and structure that promotes whatever our agenda of inclusivity and welfare for everyone is. So that is what I wanted to say. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much. Barbara.
I hope the background behind me testifies that I really cared to hear you today. And please tell me if the sound is really too bad. So just cut me off. Then in this case, thank you so much. I call out all of you, and especially the organizers, for organizing these 3 episodes. I could realize precarious, so a former convener of a network of EASA. At the same time, I can totally relate with the value of like informal support, and so how EASA can serve to fill those cracks that the system, or like in my case maybe also us, have created. So yeah, thank you for this, and I hope that this will not finish with the 3 episodes. So my first question to you is if you already have some concrete ideas or percolating some about what else apart from the mentorship program or something else, like what type of structures we can create within EASA to continue with this. And the second question would be then, will this still have the title Women and Leadership? Don't take it as a criticism, and like I also accept if your answer will be off. Do we again have to talk about that? But I wondered about those categories of women and leadership. Leadership itself is a masculine to me category. I absolutely acknowledge that you have qualified that, you have talked about gracefulness, but still, it comes up here, this idea of like leadership. Whereas the examples you have been giving were more pointing towards the importance of care or solidarity. So my question to the organizers, but also I'm just curious how you would articulate the answer, like why women? Then what is the answer? What is the role of people who don't identify as women, and why leadership? And so, sorry, what's the final question, Cristina? We've never met in person, but I'm following your text for many years now, and the text itself can be, through text, you can be such a wonderful companion as well. So thank you so much to, I think all women and all anthropologists who have been companions to me through text also, although this is a different type of mentorship. But yeah, I'll switch off now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. So before we run out of time, I do want to advertise our next episode, which I'm going to link it in chat, which is, Cristina, also about another kind of intersectional way in which people might be disprivileged, which is disability and neurodivergence. And so this is again really an important intersection of disprivilege that we need to take into account. And I don't know in other contexts, but I know in Ireland, for example, the universities are quite good about that. So I think that there's we can talk about good practice that we've seen in other contexts and learn from that. I do take the sort of veiled criticism about women and leadership serious, Barbara, but I think also that and unfortunately it's no longer visible on the new website, but on the old EASA website, there was a section where you could see who was in the successive executive committees of EASA, and I think except for Marilyn Strathern, who was a president somewhere towards the beginnings of EASA, the first woman president, was I don't remember, but she came very, very late, right? And sorry, I'm just having an issue of memory at the moment. But I think it is important to emphasize women. If you look at our student body, 90% of our students are women. If you look at, if not more, right? Whereas if you look at the professorial body, you see that a lot more are men and a lot more, that kind of division between more junior positions in the university and more senior positions in university is clearly skewed towards men still. And so I think that it's important to have women in positions of leadership. And the other important topic that I wish EASA could address at some point, and it might not happen during this mandate because we're already really busy with everything, and our time is limited now. The conference is approaching, and so we have really important tasks to fulfill. Is actually to set up a support group for people who want to apply to ERC funding, but do not have the institutional support to do so. And I don't think it's a coincidence that I think all the speakers in at least this episode and the last episode, including the organizers, do have this valuable experience as ERC principal investigators. And it might be criticized because of the projectification of academia, which I completely understand. The fact that in an ERC project we have PhD positions and postdoc positions that are precarious, and ERC still produce PhDs that will not have a job later on. This is all problematic, and we know it, right? But at the same time, talking about age, for example, I feel that the ERC at my age of 49 is the only way that I have to actually get a permanent position in academia, right? So I think it's important to sort of invest in a support structure and in a support network for people who might not have institutional support to learn how to apply for an ERC project, to learn how to be over-prepared, like you said, Cristina, for an ERC interview, right? And I know that this happens massively in Eastern Europe, where there's rarely any support institutionally for that. So that's one of the things that we want to tackle, or that I wish, I would like EASA to see tackling. My mandate is coming to an end, and so does Hayal's, and so we're going to give the leadership of EASA further to other people. This is the right moment for me to encourage you to think about running for elections within EASA. You are already in positions of visibility. You are already in positions where you've accumulated a lot of exceptional experience of what it means to come from a position of underprivilege and to reach a certain position where you can mentor other people and you can contribute to changing the culture in your own institutions. So you're very welcome to think about how to change the culture within EASA as well when it comes to that. Sertaç.
I just want to add something about how important it is to understand the issues related to the structure. So it's kind of, I find it extremely unhelpful if we lose the sight of structural problems and always think like it's a kind of almost like a food chain and some of them are on top and some of them are at the bottom. But we also know and that's why when we were organizing as a senior women, because the entire mentorship is for diverse people, but the kind of senior women in leadership specifically about how to be a kind of leader, become a leader that is very much aware of these kind of structural problems and is generating support, right? And one of the things I want to kind of say about that, because Ana mentioned being a PI, but still somehow generating jobs that are precarious, as if it's the PI's fault, whereas the PIs often, like you said, end up applying to ERC because of their own survival and with the hope, probably a little bit of a romantic hope, that it will generate jobs for others, and maybe a little bit romantic hope that once they generate jobs, they can also provide support and enable juniors. And as somebody who was a little bit naive during her own tenure myself, I have to say one of the things I did, for instance, I had a couple of different type of contracts. One of them was for 2 years, and I felt very, very wrong about that 2-year contract. The funding didn't have enough money, so we had to advertise it for 2 years. And then after, like, we only expected that postdoc to submit 2 papers, and after they kind of drafted and submitted their papers, I decided that person needed to turn their PhD dissertation into a book contract. At least if they left the project with a book contract, I would have some support towards securing a permanent job for that person, right? But I have to say, once the structure is toxic and you don't stop on, like, okay, how can I say that these structural problems need to be understood properly? Otherwise, we are all going to become part of the toxicity. So for that person, even having these regular, like, I don't care, you just finish your book contract. If the day that the publisher expect you 2 chapters, that's fine. I can meet with you regularly. I can provide you support in finishing the kind of book proposal, blah, blah. And even that was too much for that candidate. And it wasn't because I was wrong. It wasn't because she was a bad person. It was just because the system is toxic and we have to find ways of thinking beyond that panic mode. Like, even when you are being the best PI in the limited conditions you are given, things can still blow all over your face. So that's why these kind of sessions are very important to shift the perspective from our own personal, very kind of, how can I say, like, poisonous situation, and understand the broader structure so that we can have solidarity with each other. Like that's something I believe in politically very fully. And that's it. I can talk more, but I really shouldn't.
Thank you for that, Sertaç. I think you've touched on something extremely sensitive and extremely important that I think, of course, we don't have time to discuss, is this hope of being able to change the system from within romantic, or is it realistic, And of course, what systems are we talking about? Because I think, I mean, I don't want to sound naive, and I know, of course, that our mandate will finish soon. I'm talking about Hayal and I, right? I mean, the other members of the executive committee are wonderful, of course, and some of them will continue and carry out the work. But I do feel that we did manage to change some dynamics within EASA, And then EASA is the very finite institution that we know it is. But at the same time, I think that, it did empower people to take a stance in their departments when it came to Gaza. It did provide for a framework to refer to for legitimacy. And I hope it's going to be the same in Poznan, but in Barcelona, that was the EASA conference where I saw the most non-white people ever at an EASA conference. It was amazing to see, So I do hope for a change of culture in that way. And I hope that, having been an accessible executive committee and leadership is encouraging the membership to to change and to dare. And I want to just briefly mention how Giulia and I met, because Giulia and I met through Roberta, and Roberta and I met in Barcelona. It was midnight, and Hayal and I were coming back from a work dinner on academic freedom and human rights. And Roberta stopped us on the way, and she introduced herself to us, and she said, I am very grateful for being in EASA at this particular point, at this particular moment with you in leadership. I am at your service. Let me know how I can help. And this workshop, this webinar is partly a consequence of that meeting and of her coming up to us and saying, I want to be of service, right? And so I think that we have to make institutions accountable that way, and we have to make our leadership approachable that way, right? So that people with ideas and with courage and with the skills to do things come forth and do them with us. And hopefully after we're done with the mandate as well. So on this, I'm conscious that we're running out of time, but we started late, so I took the freedom of prolonging it a little bit. Any final thoughts and comments, Cristina and Giulia?
No, just the thought that as things progress and perhaps reflections on this kind of theme, leadership or whatever else we want to call it, that we begin to avoid thinking in terms of we, them. That doesn't really help when you are in positions of responsibility within an institution. Mercy is two-sided, and thinking about us, them, doesn't help. So my last word.
Thank you very much. Giulia?
Thank you. I just want to thank you. I think that there's a lot of food for thought for all of us now individually, and hopefully, more conversation will happen at EASA in person, and this is for those who actually have the fundings to travel, and this is another thing on the table. So I hope there will be more in person and remotely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sertaç?
Actually, we should turn to you. You were one of the speakers. I was the organizer. I will thank everyone, I think, for joining us, for sharing their insights. I just want to say, if there's a systemic problem, we have to constantly ask ourselves, what else can we do? Because as soon as you kind of turn into that automatic mode rather than manual mode, then you are feeding the system. That's it. That's why it's a hard job. That's why kind of series like this are very helpful. And that like we can't just, do what's expected. As soon as you start doing what's expected, you are feeding the system. You're just hiring postdocs and PhDs and doing this and that. I know we have to be also careful with the burden of care,
Yeah.
falling on certain type of people. But to be honest, if the long-term results, you know, through these discussions, through our reflections, through sharing good experiences, is kind of having something transformative, then I don't know, I think it's a political responsibility. That duty of care is not equally distributed, obviously, but so is the political responsibility is never equally distributed. So I just want to say that. So thank you everyone for both joining, allowing us the space. Ana and Sultan isn't here, and Hayal and Ana, your input. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having made this possible and for all the energy that you've put into it. And you sound very pessimistic, but I really want to commend your optimism and your energy. You always brought amazing energy to the table, and we're very grateful for that, Sertaç. And of course to Roberta as well and to Sultan. So thank you very much. Hope to see you at the next episode. And feel free to approach us, you know, within EASA. Like, let's make that the universe that we're trying to change one step at a time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.
Oh, I think I need to, but I don't know how to.